Taemin stood in the observer gallery watching 850 alien beings decide the fate of his entire species. The massive council chamber stretched out below him like a vast amphitheater filled with creatures that barely looked real. Some had tentacles instead of arms, others floated in bubbles of strange gas, and a few looked like walking trees made of crystal. All of them were about to vote on whether humanity deserved to exist as a free species. The vote had been going on for 3 days now. Each alien representative took their turn to speak about why humans were too dangerous to remain independent. They talked about human aggression and how quickly humans spread across space once they learned to travel between stars. They mentioned human unpredictability and their tendency to fight each other even when facing common enemies. Most of all, they feared how humans adapted to any environment they encountered. Taemin had spent 2 years on this space station, trying to convince these beings that humans could be trusted. He had shown them art and music and poetry from Earth. He had explained human philosophy and science and dreams of peace. None of it mattered now. The aliens had made up their minds long before the formal vote began. Speaker Veltharion rose from the central platform. His species looked like massive beetles covered in golden plates that reflected the chamber lights. His voice echoed through translation devices in hundreds of different languages as he announced the final tally. 847 votes for enslavement, only 3 votes against. The decision was final. Taemin felt his legs give out as he gripped the gallery railing. 50 years of human space exploration had led to this moment. 50 years of careful diplomacy and cultural exchange had ended with his species being sentenced to collective slavery. The aliens below began filing out of the chamber as if they had just voted on a routine trade agreement rather than the freedom of an entire civilization. A guard with 4 arms and skin like blue metal approached Taemin in the gallery. The translator device on the guard's chest crackled to life. Human diplomat Taemin, you will come with us now. Speaker Veltharion wishes to discuss the terms of compliance. Taemin followed the guard through corridors filled with beings from across the galaxy. None of them looked at him directly. Most alien species avoided eye contact with humans anyway, since they found human eyes disturbing. Something about the way humans looked directly at things instead of using peripheral vision like most prey species did. Taemin had never thought of humans as predators until he came to live among aliens who clearly saw them that way. The meeting room was smaller than Taemin expected. Speaker Veltharion waited alone behind a curved desk made from some kind of living wood that pulsed with soft light. The beetle-like alien gestured for Taemin to sit in a chair designed for human proportions. At least they had prepared for this conversation. Your species has 30 solar cycles to surrender all military assets and prepare for integration into the galactic labor system, Veltharion said without preamble. Human colonies will be dismantled and populations relocated to designated work planets. Your homeworld Earth will become a preserve for studying human biological development. Taemin stared at the alien leader. You want to turn my people into slaves and my planet into a zoo? We prefer the term managed species integration, Veltharion replied. Your people will be cared for and given meaningful work. Many enslaved species report high satisfaction with their assigned roles in galactic society. What if we refuse? Veltharion's golden plates shifted in what Taemin had learned was the equivalent of a shrug. Then your species will be eliminated entirely. We have done this before with aggressive species that refused integration. It is always regrettable but sometimes necessary for galactic stability. Taemin thought about the 3 votes against enslavement. Which species voted to let us remain free? The Kethvari, the Nulsan, and the Merdani, Veltharion said. All species that were once enslaved themselves before earning their freedom through centuries of proven loyalty. They remember what it was like to lose their independence. How did they earn their freedom? By demonstrating that they could control their aggressive impulses and contribute to galactic civilization without disrupting established order. Your species shows no such potential. Humans fight constantly, even among themselves. You have had over 200 major wars in the past 1,000 years of your recorded history. No other species comes close to that level of sustained conflict. Taemin wanted to argue, but the numbers were accurate. Humans did fight each other regularly, even when it made no logical sense. They competed over resources they could share, territories they could divide, and ideas that could coexist. From an outside perspective, humanity probably looked insane. We also innovate constantly, Taman said. Human technology advanced faster in the last century than most species achieve in 10,000 years. Yes, and that terrifies every civilization in this galaxy, Veltharion replied. Do you know why most species take millions of years to develop? Space travel? Because they achieve balance with their environment and stop changing. Humans never stop changing. You adapt to everything. You turn poisons into medicines and disasters into opportunities. This makes you extremely dangerous to established galactic order. Taman realized he was hearing the real reason for humanity's enslavement. It was not just about human aggression or unpredictability. The Galactic Council was afraid that humans would upset the careful balance of power that had existed for millennia. They were afraid that humanity would keep growing and changing and eventually challenge their authority. 30 solar cycles, Veltharion repeated. Your government representatives on Earth have already been informed of this decision. We suggest you begin preparations for transition immediately. Resistance will only make the process more difficult for your people. The meeting ended, and Taman found himself escorted back to the human embassy section of the space station. His assistant So Young was waiting for him with a grim expression. She had been monitoring communications from Earth during the vote. The news was not encouraging. Half the governments want to surrender immediately, So Young reported. They think cooperation might earn us better treatment. The other half are talking about fighting even though our military leaders say we have no chance against Galactic Council forces. Taman slumped into his chair and stared at the star charts covering his office walls. 50 human colonies scattered across 30 star systems. 2 billion people living on worlds that would soon be invaded by aliens with technology, thousands of years more advanced than anything humanity possessed. It seemed hopeless. What about the back-channel communications? Taman asked. So Young glanced around nervously, even though the room was supposed to be secure. Hyunwoo says his research project is ahead of schedule. He thinks he might have something useful before the deadline. Might have something is not the same as will have something, Taman replied. We need concrete options, not experimental hopes. It is better than nothing, So Young said. And there are other preparations being made. Contingency plans that do not depend on experimental research. Taman looked at his assistant more carefully. So Young had been a military officer before, joining the diplomatic corps. She still had contacts in intelligence services across human space. If anyone would know about secret preparations for resistance, it would be her. How long before the first Galactic Council fleets reach human space? Taman asked. 3 weeks, So Young answered. They are sending enforcement fleets to our outer colonies first, probably expecting us to surrender once we see their overwhelming force. And if we do not surrender? So Young smiled for the first time since the vote. Then they will learn something important about humans that apparently did not come up during their research. We are much better at fighting when we have nothing left to lose. Admiral Jae-sung watched the alien fleet approach New Sol Colony through his command ship's main screen. 12 massive vessels shaped like floating cities moved in perfect formation toward the human settlement. Each ship was larger than anything humanity had ever built and probably carried enough firepower to glass an entire planet. The aliens expected this to be simple. They were about to learn otherwise. All ships maintain radio silence, Jae-sung ordered his communications officer. Let them think we ran away scared. The human fleet hung motionless behind the colony's moon, completely hidden by a network of sensor scramblers that had taken 2 years to install. From the aliens' perspective, New Sol appeared to be a ghost town. No ships in orbit, no defensive platforms, no signs of military presence, just empty buildings and silent streets. Da-eun crouched in a maintenance tunnel beneath New Sol's Main Street, watching alien landing craft descend toward the spaceport. She had been an engineer before the war started 3 weeks ago. Now she was something between a saboteur and a soldier, waiting to spring a trap that had taken months to prepare. The alien troops that emerged from their transports looked confident and relaxed. They moved in loose formations across the landing field, their weapons lowered, clearly expecting no resistance. Their translucent suits glowed with internal light, and their helmets reflected the colony's artificial sky. These were Zephyrian shock troops, elite units that specialized in rapid planetary conquest. Contact in 30 seconds, Da-Yun whispered into her throat microphone. The words would be relayed through fiber optic cables to human resistance cells, hidden throughout the colony. Radio communications were too dangerous since the aliens could intercept them. The first alien patrol reached the edge of the commercial district and began scanning the abandoned shops and restaurants. They found exactly what they expected to find: empty buildings with signs of hasty evacuation, personal belongings left behind by civilians who fled in panic, no weapons, no booby traps, no indication that anyone planned to resist. Contact in 10 seconds, Da-Yun counted down. The aliens spread out across the main plaza, their formations becoming even more relaxed as they confirmed the colony was truly abandoned. Some of them began removing their helmets to taste the colony's atmosphere. Others started taking readings with scientific instruments, probably analyzing human architecture and technology. Contact now. Da-Yun pressed her detonator. The plaza erupted in controlled chaos. What had appeared to be decorative fountains revealed themselves as concealed weapon systems. Storefronts that looked abandoned dropped away to expose human fighters with military-grade equipment. The colony's streetlights suddenly blazed with blinding intensity designed to overload alien optical systems. But the real surprise was the buildings themselves. Human engineers had spent months installing hidden mechanisms throughout New Seoul's infrastructure. Walls rotated to create new corridors and block escape routes. Floors tilted at calculated angles to funnel alien troops into predetermined kill zones. Even the artificial gravity systems had been modified to create disorienting effects in specific areas. The aliens found themselves fighting an entire city that had been turned into a massive trap. Sang-Ho watched the battle from his position among a group of human refugees aboard an alien transport ship. He had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment of all, posing as a captured civilian while actually gathering intelligence about alien technology and tactics. The other refugees thought he was just another scared colonist running from the fighting. "The humans are more organized than expected," one of the alien guards said to another. Their translation devices automatically converted their words into human language for the refugees' benefit. Command thought this would be a simple evacuation operation. Sang-Ho memorized every detail he could observe about the alien ships, layout, and crew procedures. The guards carried energy weapons with obvious power packs that could probably be removed or damaged. Their communication devices appeared to use quantum entanglement rather than radio waves, which explained why human signal jammers had no effect. Most importantly, the aliens seemed genuinely surprised by human resistance tactics. "How many more colonies are we supposed to pacify?" another guard asked. 47 in this sector alone, the first guard replied. Command estimates 6 months for complete integration of human space. 6 months. Sang-Ho filed that information away along with everything else he was learning. The aliens expected this war to last half a year at most. They had planned for overwhelming force against primitive resistance, not for the kind of asymmetric warfare humans were actually conducting. Back on New Seoul, Da-Yun led her squad through service tunnels toward the alien landing site. The initial ambush had worked perfectly, but now came the harder part. Human forces needed to capture alien equipment and personnel for intelligence purposes. Dead aliens could not answer questions about their technology and tactics. "Remember, we want prisoners," Da-Yun told her team as they climbed toward street level. Especially their officers and technical specialists. The fighting above had shifted from surprise attack to urban warfare. Human defenders used their knowledge of the colony's modified layout to stay ahead of alien troops who kept getting lost in buildings that had been redesigned to confuse invaders. Meanwhile, alien forces found their usual tactics useless against an enemy that refused to engage in direct confrontation. Admiral Jae-sung received constant updates from resistance cells throughout New Seoul. The battle was going better than anyone had dared to hope. Alien casualties were mounting while human losses remained minimal. More importantly, the aliens were becoming frustrated and making mistakes as they struggled to adapt to unfamiliar combat conditions. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the alien fleet commander," his communications officer reported. "Put it through," Jae-sung ordered. The main screen displayed a creature that looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a tree. Its translucent body pulsed with patterns of colored light that probably indicated emotional states. When it spoke, the translation was stiff and formal. "Human military forces, You will cease resistance immediately and surrender unconditionally. Continued fighting will result in complete destruction of this colony and all human personnel. Jae-sung smiled. The alien commander was trying to negotiate, which meant the invasion was not going according to plan. This is Admiral Jae-sung of the Human Colonial Defense Force. Your ground troops are currently trapped in our colony. I suggest you withdraw them before we decide to keep them permanently. The aliens' light patterns shifted to what looked like anger. You cannot seriously believe your primitive forces can defeat a Galactic Council fleet. I do not need to defeat your fleet, Jae-sung replied. I just need to make conquering human space more expensive than you are willing to pay. The transmission ended abruptly. On New Sol's surface, alien artillery began bombarding areas where human resistance was strongest. But the bombardment came too late. Most human forces had already withdrawn to deeper tunnel systems that could survive orbital strikes. The aliens were destroying their own prize while the humans they wanted to capture slipped away underground. Sang-ho felt the transport ship change course as new orders came from the fleet command. Instead of proceeding to a processing facility, they were heading back toward the Galactic Council's nearest military base. The alien guards seemed nervous and kept talking about unexpected developments in human space. This was supposed to be routine, one guard complained. Humans were supposed to be barely space-capable. How did they build all those hidden defenses? Command says human technology is more advanced than initial reports indicated, another guard replied. They want to study captured human equipment before proceeding with additional invasions. Sang-ho realized that the aliens were beginning to understand they had seriously underestimated human capabilities. The Galactic Council had expected to fight Stone Age primitives with laser rifles. Instead, they were encountering an organized military force that had been preparing for this war longer than anyone suspected. Admiral Jae-sung watched the alien fleet withdraw from New Sol orbit. They left behind nearly 1,000 troops trapped in the colony's tunnel systems and took significant casualties from human defensive systems they never saw coming. More importantly, they had learned that conquering human space would not be the simple task the Galactic Council had planned. Send a message to all human colonies, Jae-sung ordered. Tell them New Sol held. Tell them the aliens can be beaten, and tell them to prepare for the real war to begin. Da-un emerged from the tunnels to find New Sol's streets littered with abandoned alien equipment. Her engineering teams were already studying the technology, looking for weaknesses they could exploit in future battles. The colony had been damaged, but not destroyed. The humans had proven they could fight back, but everyone knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Council would not make the same mistakes twice. Next time, they would come with overwhelming force and fewer assumptions about human capabilities. The question was whether humanity could spring enough traps and inflict enough casualties to change the aliens' minds about enslaving an entire species. Hyun-woo stared at the test results displayed across 3 holographic screens in his underground laboratory. Project Wildcard had produced something extraordinary, though he was not sure the Galactic Council would consider it good news. For 6 months, human scientists had been deliberately exposing volunteer subjects to alien pathogens collected from crashed ships and captured equipment. The results defied everything known about biological warfare. Show me the immunity progression, again, Hyun-woo told his research assistant. The screens flickered to display charts tracking human immune responses to 17 different alien biological agents. Every single pathogen designed to incapacitate or kill humans had instead triggered adaptive responses that left test subjects stronger than before. It was as if human immune systems treated alien bioweapons as puzzles to be solved rather than threats to be feared. The Zephyrian neural toxin is the most remarkable case, his assistant explained. Initial exposure caused temporary paralysis as expected, but after 72 hours, subjects developed complete immunity. More than that, their nervous systems became resistant to all similar compounds. We essentially vaccinated them against an entire class of alien weapons. Hyun-woo nodded grimly. Humans had evolved on a planet that constantly tried to kill them with diseases, poisons, radiation, climate shifts, and countless other environmental hazards. Other species had evolved on more stable worlds where such extreme adaptation was unnecessary. The Galactic Council had never encountered anything like human biological resilience. What about the psychological warfare compounds? Hyun-woo asked. Complete failure from the alien perspective, his assistant replied. The fear toxins and aggression inhibitors designed by council species have no lasting effect on human brain chemistry. In some cases, they actually enhanced human performance by triggering adrenaline responses. A priority communications signal interrupted their discussion. Hyun-woo activated the quantum communicator and found himself looking at Young-soo, a human intelligence operative who had been presumed dead for 3 months. Young-soo appeared to be sitting in some kind of medical facility, though his surroundings looked distinctly alien. Hyun-woo, I do not have much time, Young-soo said urgently. I am transmitting from inside a Galactic Council research station. You need to hear what I have learned about our enemies. The image quality was poor, but Young-soo's voice came through clearly. He had been captured during the battle for Titan Colony and taken to a council facility for study. What he discovered there changed everything humans thought they knew about galactic civilization. The council species are not warriors, Young-soo continued. They are bureaucrats and scientists and philosophers who have never faced a real threat. Their military technology is advanced, but their tactics are thousands of years out of date. They fight wars the way academics write papers, with careful planning and peer review and committee decisions. Hyun-woo realized the implications immediately. Human military doctrine emphasized rapid adaptation and individual initiative in combat situations. Council forces apparently relied on rigid protocols that could not adjust to unexpected circumstances. This explained why human resistance had been so effective despite inferior technology. But that is not the most important thing, Young-soo said. I have been studying their biological data. Every council species evolved on planets with stable climates and minimal environmental threats. They have never developed adaptive capabilities like humans possess. When their environment changes, they relocate rather than adapt. When they face new diseases, they retreat rather than develop immunity. The transmission started breaking up as alien security systems detected the unauthorized communication. Young-soo spoke faster, trying to convey critical information before his signal was cut off. They are terrified of us because we represent something they cannot understand, Young-soo said. We are the only species they have encountered that thrives on change and conflict. Every other intelligent species in the galaxy seeks stability and predictability. Humans actively seek out challenges and dangerous situations for entertainment. The signal died. Hyun-woo stared at the blank screen, processing what he had learned. Humanity was not just technologically different from council species. They were psychologically and biologically unique in ways that made them incompatible with galactic civilization as it currently existed. Yoon-ji arrived at the laboratory 20 minutes later, carrying data files from her xenobiology research center. She had been analyzing tissue samples from dead aliens, and the results supported Young-soo's intelligence report in disturbing ways. Look at these genetic sequences, Yoon-ji said as she uploaded her data to Hyun-woo's analysis system. Council species show signs of extensive genetic modification going back millions of years. They have systematically removed traits associated with aggression, risk-taking, and rapid adaptation. They turned themselves into domesticated animals, Hyun-woo said. Essentially, yes, Yoon-ji agreed. They bred out everything that made them capable of surviving environmental challenges or military conflicts. That is why they need such overwhelming technological advantages to win wars. They cannot match human resourcefulness or adaptability, no matter how advanced their equipment becomes. Hyun-woo studied the genetic data more carefully. Council species had optimized themselves for intelligence and cooperation at the expense of everything humans considered essential for survival. No wonder they found human behavior incomprehensible. From their perspective, humans must seem like violent savages who refuse to embrace civilization. There is something else, Yoon-ji said. I found evidence that the Council has been deliberately suppressing aggressive species for millions of years. Any civilization that shows signs of rapid expansion or military innovation gets conquered and enslaved before they can become a threat. We are not the first species this has happened to, but we might be the first species capable of fighting back effectively, Hyun-woo realized. A new communication came through the quantum link. This time it was Admiral Jae-sung calling from the bridge of his flagship. The expression on his face suggested important developments in the ongoing war. Hyun-woo, we have received surrender offers from 3 council species. Jae-sung announced. The Kethvari, Nul-Sin, and Merdani want to switch sides and fight against their former masters. Apparently our tactics have impressed them enough to risk everything on joining the human resistance. This was unexpected. The three species that had voted against human enslavement were now offering to become active allies in the war. It suggested that Young-Su's intelligence about Council military weakness was accurate. What do they want in exchange for their help? Hyun-woo asked. Freedom, Jae-sung replied. They want us to help them overthrow the Council system that has oppressed them for centuries. They are offering to share their technology and knowledge of Council weaknesses in exchange for human military support. Yoon-ji leaned forward toward the communicator. Admiral, do we know why these species were enslaved originally? The same reason the Council tried to enslave us, Jae-sung answered. They were too aggressive and innovative for Council comfort. The difference is that they allowed themselves to be defeated instead of fighting to the end. Hyun-woo began to see the larger picture. The Galactic Council was not just trying to conquer humanity, they were trying to preserve a stagnant civilization that had not faced real challenges in millions of years. Human resistance threatened everything they had built by proving that their system was vulnerable to determined opposition. There is more, Jae-sung continued. Our intelligence networks report that other enslaved species are beginning to rebel as well. News of human victories is spreading throughout Council space faster than their censorship systems can contain it. We may have started something much larger than anyone anticipated. The implications were staggering. Human resistance might trigger the collapse of the entire Galactic Council system. Millions of enslaved species could rise up simultaneously, creating chaos across thousands of star systems. It would be the largest war in galactic history. Are we prepared for that level of conflict? Yoon-ji asked. We do not have a choice, Jae-sung replied. The Council will never allow humans to remain free after what we have done. They see us as an existential threat to their civilization. This war will only end when either they destroy us completely or we destroy their ability to threaten anyone else. Hyun-woo looked at his research data again. Project Wildcard had proven that humans could adapt to any biological weapon the Council possessed. Young-Su's intelligence showed that Council military forces were unprepared for human tactics. Yoon-ji's genetic analysis revealed fundamental weaknesses in Council species that could be exploited. For the first time since the war began, Hyun-woo believed humanity might actually win. I am sending my research results to all human military. Commands, Hyun-woo told the admiral. Our forces need to understand that we are not fighting an invincible enemy. We are fighting an enemy that has forgotten how to fight. And I am preparing new proposals for our potential allies, Yoon-ji added. If other species want freedom, we can show them how humans achieve it. Not through submission or negotiation, but through refusing to surrender no matter what the odds. Dong-hyun stood on the bridge of the human liberation ship Defiance, watching the slave world of Kepler 442b grow larger on the main screen. 6 months ago, he had been a diplomat trying to prevent war through negotiation. Now he was leading a joint human-alien strike force to free enslaved populations across Council space. The galaxy had changed completely, and he was still adapting to his new role. Sensors detect 14 Council garrison ships in orbit, reported the ship's tactical officer. Standard defensive formation around the orbital processing platforms. Any signs they have detected our approach? Dong-hyun asked. Negative, sir. The Kethvari stealth systems are working perfectly. We should be able to reach optimal strike position without being noticed. The Liberation Fleet consisted of 30 human warships and 15 vessels contributed by the 3 rebel species that had joined the human cause. It was not a large force by galactic standards, but it was perfectly suited for the new kind of warfare humans had introduced to the galaxy. Fast strikes against isolated targets, guerrilla tactics in space, and most importantly, liberating enslaved populations who could join the growing rebellion. Mi-young coordinated the ground assault from the command ship's tactical center. She had become an expert at managing multi-species military operations, something no human had ever needed to do before the war began. The challenge was not just language and cultural differences, but completely different approaches to combat and strategy. Kethvari forces report ready for orbital insertion, Mi-young announced. Nolson electronic warfare teams are in position to disable Council communication systems. Merdani heavy assault units are standing by for direct engagement. Human, forces ready on all fronts. added Wu Jin from his position at the strategic planning station. Remember, this is not a conquest mission. We are here to liberate, not to occupy. Local populations need to see us as allies, not as new masters. Dong Yun nodded. This distinction had become crucial to human strategy over the past 6 months. Unlike the Galactic Council, humans were not trying to build an empire. They were trying to tear down an existing empire by convincing its subjects that freedom was possible. Every liberated world became a beacon of hope for other enslaved species. The attack began with Nulsen ships jamming Council communications across the entire star system. Within seconds, the garrison forces found themselves cut off from their command structure and unable to coordinate their response. Human tactics relied heavily on disrupting enemy information systems, since most Council species became helpless when they could not follow predetermined protocols. Kethvari stealth ships delivered the first wave of human special forces directly to the planet's surface. These teams had trained for months to work with alien allies in combat situations that required split-second cooperation between species. With completely different biological and psychological capabilities, it was a challenge that no military force in galactic history had ever faced. First-wave teams are reporting successful insertion, Mi Young announced. Ground resistance is minimal. Council forces were not expecting an attack on this world. Why would they? Wu Jin replied. Kepler 442b has been a model slave world for over 1,000 years. The population was completely pacified using standard council methods. They probably thought rebellion was impossible here. Dong Hyun watched. The tactical displays showing human and alien forces advancing across the planet's surface. The enslaved population consisted mainly of Torvani, a species that had been conquered by the Council over 2 millennia ago. They had been bred for compliance and manual labor, with most of their natural aggression suppressed through genetic modification and psychological conditioning. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Council Garrison Commander, the communications officer reported. Put it through, Dong Hyun ordered. The main screen displayed a tall, thin alien with pale skin and oversized eyes. Its species looked fragile compared to humans, which was probably accurate since Council military forces rarely engaged in direct combat. When it spoke, the translation carried overtones of confusion and panic. Unknown vessels, you are in violation of Galactic Council territorial sovereignty. Withdraw immediately or face destruction by superior forces. Dong Hyun smiled. The alien commander was following standard protocols that assumed any challenge to Council authority would come from another established government with similar military doctrine. The idea of guerrilla warfare conducted by multiple species working together was completely outside their experience. This is Dong Hyun of the Human Liberation Force, he replied. We are here to free the enslaved population of this world. Your garrison forces have 30 minutes to evacuate, or they will be considered hostile occupiers. The alien's expression shifted to something that might have been disbelief. Liberation Force? Humans are not authorized to conduct military operations in Council space. You will surrender immediately and submit to processing for violations of the peace accords. The peace accords were broken when your Council voted to enslave my species, Dong Hyun said. We are now at war, and this world is about to become free whether you approve or not. The transmission ended abruptly. On the planet's surface, human and alien liberation forces were already making contact with Torvani slave populations. The challenge was convincing beings who had been conditioned for submission that resistance was possible and worthwhile. Mi Young received reports from ground teams as they established contact with local populations. The Torvani are responding better than expected, she announced. Our psychological warfare specialists say decades of Council propaganda are breaking down rapidly when confronted with proof that rebellion can succeed. What kind of proof are we providing? Dong Hyun asked. Living proof, Mi Young replied. Seeing Kethvari, Nulsen, and Merdani forces fighting alongside humans is destroying everything the Torvani were taught about the impossibility of resisting Council authority. They thought the 3 rebel species were myths created by human propaganda. Wu Jin studied incoming intelligence reports from across the Liberation Zone. Council forces are abandoning their positions faster than our tactical models predicted. They are not even attempting to fight for control of critical infrastructure. This suggests they are following evacuation protocols designed for disasters rather than military defeats. That makes sense, Dong Hyun realized. Council forces have never faced a serious military challenge. They probably have no protocols for actually fighting a war, only for managing rebellions and disasters. The battle for Kepler 442b was over within 6 hours. Council garrison forces evacuated to their ships and jumped to hyperspace without attempting serious resistance. The orbital processing platforms were captured intact along with extensive records of Council operations throughout the sector. Most importantly, 3 billion Torvani slaves were suddenly free for the first time in over 2,000 years. Dong-hyun joined the first diplomatic mission to the planet's surface 2 days later. The Torvani provisional government consisted of individuals who had never expected to govern anything more complex than a work detail. They were struggling to understand concepts like political representation and individual rights that had been systematically erased from their culture. "We do not understand why you freed us," said the Torvani spokesman, an elderly being whose scars indicated decades of hard labor. "What do you want from us in exchange for our freedom?" "We want you to remain free," Dong-hyun replied, "and we want you to help us free others who are still enslaved. But the choice is yours. Humans do not force anyone to fight for causes they do not believe in." "The Council taught us that freedom always comes with a price too high to pay," the spokesman said. "They said that independent species destroy themselves through war and chaos. How do we know you are not leading us toward our own destruction?" Dong-hyun had heard similar questions on every world the Liberation Force had freed. Council propaganda was sophisticated and deeply embedded in the psychology of enslaved populations. Overcoming millennia of conditioning required more than military victory. "Look around you," Dong-hyun said. "Your people are making choices for themselves for the first time in 2,000 years. Some of those choices will be mistakes, but they will be your mistakes to make and learn from. The Council never gave you that opportunity because they were afraid of what you might become if you were allowed to grow and change." The Torvani spokesman considered this carefully. "And if we choose to join your rebellion against the Council, then we will teach you everything we know about fighting for freedom," Dong-hyun replied. "Human military advisors will train your people in tactics and strategy. Our engineers will help you build weapons and defenses. Our diplomats will help you establish relationships with other free species. But ultimately, your freedom depends on your willingness to defend it." Within a month, Kepler 442b had become a major recruitment center for the growing rebellion. Torvani volunteers joined human liberation fleets while their engineers contributed industrial capacity to the war effort. More importantly, news of their successful liberation spread to other enslaved worlds, inspiring hope in populations that had given up on freedom centuries ago. Boram stood before the rebuilt Galactic Assembly on the neutral world of Haven, looking out at representatives from over 300 species. 2 years ago, she had been governor of a small human colony. Now she was president of the Galactic Liberation Coalition and about to propose a new form of government for the entire galaxy. The old council chambers had been destroyed in the final battle, but this new assembly hall symbolized hope for a different future. "Delegates of free worlds," Boram began, her words translated simultaneously into hundreds of languages. "We gather, today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals who have chosen cooperation over domination." The audience included former slaves, former masters, and species that had remained neutral during the war. Some looked skeptical, others hopeful, and a few appeared genuinely confused by the concept of voluntary political association. The Galactic Council had ruled through force for so long that many species had forgotten what democratic governance looked like. Fleet Admiral In-ho watched the proceedings from the military observers section. His combined liberation fleet had won the final battle against Council core worlds 6 months ago, but military victory was meaningless without a stable political solution. The challenge now was convincing hundreds of diverse species to work together voluntarily instead of through the coercion that had held the old empire together. The council system failed because it was based on fear and control, Boram continued. Our new federation will succeed because it is based on mutual benefit and shared purpose. No species will be forced to participate, but all species will be welcome to contribute their unique strengths to our common goals. Dr. Seong-min waited in the wings with the technical proposal that would make this new government possible. His research team had spent 2 years developing systems for sharing knowledge and capabilities between species with completely different biologies and psychology. The breakthrough had come from studying human adaptability and finding ways to teach it to other species. The foundation of our federation will be the principle of adaptive cooperation, Boram announced. Instead of enforcing conformity, we will celebrate diversity. Instead of suppressing change, we will embrace innovation. Instead of maintaining rigid hierarchies, we will encourage dynamic leadership based on merit and situation. A Zephyrian delegate raised a tentacle to request permission to speak. President Boram, how can such a system maintain stability? Without central authority and fixed protocols, how do we prevent chaos and conflict? Boram smiled. This was exactly the question she had expected from species that had been conditioned to equate freedom with anarchy. The answer comes from understanding how humans learn to work together despite our aggressive nature. We developed systems that channel competition and conflict into productive activities rather than destructive ones. She gestured to activate a holographic display showing human cities and institutions. Humans compete constantly in sports, business, politics, science, and art. This competition drives innovation and progress, but it is governed by rules that prevent it from becoming destructive. Our federation will use similar principles on a galactic scale. Dr. Seung-min stepped forward to present the technical details. We have developed what we call adaptive governance protocols. Instead of fixed laws and regulations, our federation will use flexible frameworks that can evolve as circumstances change. Different species will contribute their strengths to solving common problems while maintaining their cultural autonomy. The assembled delegates listened with varying degrees of comprehension as Seung-min explained how democratic institutions could function across species with radically different decision-making processes. The key insight was that no single system would work for everyone, so the Federation needed to accommodate multiple approaches simultaneously. For species that prefer collective decision-making, we offer consensus-based councils, Seung-min explained. For species that value individual leadership, we provide competitive selection systems. For species that rely on algorithmic analysis, we have computational governance options. The Federation coordinates between these different systems rather than replacing them. A former council member from the Veltharian species stood to voice concerns. This sounds chaotic and inefficient. How can you make decisions quickly when every species uses different methods? The old council system was streamlined and effective. Effective at maintaining control, Boram replied, but terrible at solving problems or adapting to change. Our system may be messier, but it will be much more resilient because it can learn and evolve. Admiral In-ho received a priority communication from his intelligence staff. 3 former Council Corps worlds had just announced their intention to join the new Federation. This brought the total membership to over 200 species, representing the largest voluntary political association in galactic history. Admiral, we also have reports of holdout Council forces massing in the Outer Rim territories, his intelligence officer reported. Approximately 50 species still refuse to accept the new order. They appear to be preparing for guerrilla warfare against Federation worlds. In-ho nodded grimly. The war was not completely over, probably never would be. Some species would always prefer the old system of rigid hierarchy and absolute control. The Federation would have to remain strong enough to defend itself while remaining open enough to welcome new members who chose freedom over security. President Boram, a Torvani delegate called out, what guarantees do we have that this Federation will not become another empire? What prevents humans from using their military advantages to dominate other species? This was the crucial question that would determine whether the new system succeeded or failed. Boram had prepared for it carefully because she knew the answer would define the Federation's future relationship with its own power. The same thing that prevented humans from conquering each other despite thousands of years of warfare, Boram replied. We learned that cooperation produces better results than domination, not because we became peaceful, but because we became smart enough to recognize that slaves and subjects cannot contribute their full potential to common goals. She activated another holographic display showing economic and technological data from liberated worlds. Every species that has joined our Federation has experienced unprecedented growth in productivity, innovation, and quality of life. This is not because we gave them anything, but because we removed the restrictions that prevented them from achieving their potential. Dr. Seung-min added supporting evidence from his research. Council species were genetically and culturally modified to suppress traits like risk-taking, innovation, and independent thinking. We have developed therapies to reverse this conditioning safely. Species that choose these treatments show remarkable improvements in creativity and problem-solving ability. "You are offering to change us at the genetic level?" asked a Nulsan delegate with obvious concern. "We are offering to restore capabilities your species originally possessed," Seung-min corrected. "The Council suppressed these traits to make you easier to control. We can help you recover them if you choose to do so, but the choice is entirely voluntary." Boram could see the debate shifting as delegates began to understand the implications. The Federation was not just offering political freedom, but biological and psychological liberation from millions of years of imposed limitations. It was a chance for species to rediscover their own potential. "The vote will be held tomorrow," Boram announced. "Each species delegation will decide whether to join the Federation as a founding member. Those who choose not to participate will remain, free to govern themselves as they see fit, but they will not have access to Federation resources or protection." The assembly session ended, and delegates returned to their quarters to debate among themselves. Boram knew that some species would reject the proposal out of fear or cultural incompatibility. Others would join enthusiastically. A few would remain, undecided for years before making their choice. Admiral In-ho met with Boram and Dr. Seung-min that evening to review intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The picture was complex, but encouraging. Most former Council territories had experienced dramatic improvements in economic productivity and social stability after liberation. However, the holdout worlds were becoming increasingly militant in their opposition to the new order. "We may face decades of low-intensity conflict with Council remnants," In-ho warned. "They see our Federation as an existential threat to their way of life, which it probably is. Species that prefer authoritarian control will never accept voluntary cooperation as legitimate." "That is their choice," Boram replied. "We cannot force anyone to be free, and we should not try. Our responsibility is to demonstrate that freedom works better than tyranny. Eventually, most rational beings will reach the same conclusion." "And if they do not?" Seung-min asked. "Then they will remain isolated on their worlds while the rest of the galaxy moves forward," Boram said. "Authoritarian systems cannot compete with free societies in the long term because they waste too much potential. They will either adapt or become irrelevant." The vote the next day resulted in 237 species joining the Federation as founding members.